I was asked to provide a presentation on data analytics and strawberries. Just a heads up, this won't be incredibly technical because I truly believe that how you apply the data is a bit more important than how you collect it. And so we'll talk a little bit about collecting data, we'll talk a little bit about analytics, but I'm not going to go into t-tests or p-values or anything that you've heard in your stats classes. We're going to talk about how you apply it to change a business. And in this case, it's going to be a strawberry farm. To go through the agenda a little bit, just so you guys are aware of what's going to happen, there won't be any twists in this presentation. It's going to follow exactly what you see here. So we're going to talk a little bit about why data is valuable. There's just like a simple activity to see how data is involved in your daily lives. You all have phones, certainly computers, because you're students here at Cal Poly. So I'm certain you know to a great extent how important data is. But just to keep things light, we're going to do the activity anyway. I'm going to explain what some of the potential sources of data in a strawberry operation are. I have a video. The purpose of the video is it's an interview of people from all different aspects of a strawberry operation: foremen, supervisors, ranch managers, our quality inspectors, our sales team, everyone involved in an entire strawberry operation, so that way you all can see from their own lens and voice how data is impacting their work. Then we're going to go into a little bit of an open discussion on how data can be collected. And then last but not least, I'll go into an example and we'll have a little bit of I call it the information breakdown game. It's called telephone. I'm certain you all played it when you were children. We're going to use that to kind of highlight one of the most critical parts of all this, which is it doesn't matter how great your data is. If your communication channels are not clear, whether it's strawberries, whether it's Cal Poly, whether it's your own home, you will not get the results you're seeking. But to start it all off, I'll just go briefly into who I am. I'm not much older than many of you, probably the same age as some of you, so my story is very short. It started, at least for the purposes of this, at UC Davis. I went to Davis in 2015. I graduated in 2019. I studied biotechnology, bioinformatics, as Gerald said. Over there, I worked in a soil microbiology lab. So basically what we did is we would take dirt, mix it with clear liquids, which anyone who's worked in a lab, that's like the simplified way of describing what you're doing. You're mixing different liquids together. We were extracting genetic profiles of the microbes within there, and then assessing or trying to assess the impacts of different microbes on tomato plants. I also worked for the USDA as a bioinformaticist. I'm not sure what the right term is because I haven't been specifically in that industry in a while. And there we were looking at viruses that affected grapes and almonds. So pretty California-focused work. From there, I went and served in the AmeriCorps because I wasn't sure if agriculture is where I wanted to go. If anyone is questioning their future career paths, I could not recommend the AmeriCorps more. That's the program where the majority of the leadership skills that I have developed came from. Technical skills are incredible and you need to develop them, but if you have not been in a leadership position, carrying a log of wood to build a compost toilet in New Hampshire, I would recommend this experience. Many of you probably have already had something similar, but this is what kind of was the pivotal moment that changed me from probably the path of being a lab scientist, which is an amazing and incredible field, into moving into where I am now, which is basically running the data team for Good Farms, which is a grower shipper of berries, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, blueberries, and a few tomatoes, based in California, but growing all throughout North America and shipping all throughout North America. You can see behind me some robots. Those are robot harvesters that we had at one of our operations. So we're one of the top growers that engage with automation and try to advance the industry, or at least open up our fields for others to advance the industry. Yeah, also feel free to interrupt me with any questions at any point. So I've been with Good Farms for 5 years now. I lived for a year in San Quintin, Baja California. I did not speak Spanish when I started this job and had to learn Spanish on this job. I would highly recommend to anyone looking to go into the agriculture industry, no matter what level you want to be at to learn Spanish to some degree, because the leaders in this industry speak Spanish. The people that know a lot about it and are making the decisions speak Spanish. They also speak English, but you will get a lot further in your relationship with people if you speak the language that they originally spoke. So I have a question to all of you. Why is data important?
Helps you make your decisions.
Helps you make your decisions. Perfect. Anyone else?
Helps identify problems.
Helps identify problems. I like it. I like help in both of those.
You use your resources well.
Helps use your resources well. Yeah. Any other? Yeah.
So you can judge if you're improving or regressing.
That's a really good one. Being able to benchmark where you are before and after a change. Any other ideas and suggestions? Yeah.
Can develop projections.
Develop projections. Yep. Yield prediction work, which is really big now that AI has become the only word anyone wants to talk about. Any other ideas of why data is important? Yeah.
Helps you measure yourself against a goal.
Helps you measure yourself against a goal. Exactly. All of those examples are exactly why data is important, and so many more reasons. The most important, though, is a lot of people think about data sometimes very isolated to their professional lives, right? They're like, oh, what are my profit and loss numbers? What are my yield numbers? What is my breaks? How is this variety performing against another variety? And that's all incredible and important. But I also want everyone to think about the fact that data isn't everything that you do. And so what we're going to do really quickly is talk about the story, what I like to call the story of data, and then we'll look into how data is actually involved in your daily lives. So I like to think that the original unit of data, the original datum, is DNA. I know that that's like a very, it's a way for me to make data sound a lot more important maybe than a lot of people would like to think it is. But if you really look at DNA, the existence of a molecule that can hold and store information and transmit it over time is the birth of life. Everything roots to this basic unit of information, as this diagram shows, from what we assume was a single-celled organism at some point in time into the complexity we have today, like myself up here attempting to speak on data to all of you, and everything you're observing out in the fields when it comes to fungi, bacteria, or the plants themselves. Every advancement of human civilization, in my opinion, because everyone who gives a speech has to make their thing sound super important, but in my opinion ties back to the sharing of information. You have first the transmission of stories. That is something that humans are considered to be able to do differently than most all other species and living beings on Earth. We are able to share information. It took about 50,000 years for humanity to get from orally shared traditions to the first ever written form of text. It only took 3,300 years to get from the first written text to the invention of paper, which brought down the cost of transmitting information. That halves 1,400 years to get to the printing press, which is what allows us to have all of these sheets of paper that you have in front of you where you're going to rate this presentation. It's what your books are printed on. It is the way in which information was able to be standardized and widely transmitted. 500 years from the printing press, you come to today. The gap in time between each evolution in information sharing has shrunk considerably. A large part of the reason for that is that an information technology speeds up the advancement of the next information technology. Now, we live in a world of robots and drones and computer chips and AI and the ability to develop a vaccine for a novel disease in less than 2 years. And whatever the heck that is. I think it's Apple Vision, which doesn't seem to have gone anywhere yet. The point of all this being that data is really important. But it's not just the existence of information. That's existed forever. It's the application of that information to a problem. With DNA exists all over this earth. But the DNA, the code of an organism that is able to survive, is what continues and is transmitted. And that gives you evolution, and that results in the world we are today. So many books have been written. But I bet if I ask any of you, there are probably 10 common books that most people in the United States would think of when they think of the root of human knowledge. So it's not just information, it's your information being successful that also matters. So really quickly, for everyone who has a phone, if you could scan this QR code, we're going to do a quick little activity. It's a questionnaire, basically, with photos of some applications. Some might not exist anymore. It's a really rapidly changing world we're in. Some might not be applications you use. I gave this presentation last time in Mexico, and the market of apps is a little bit different. So just try to check the ones that you use for the activities that are shown. It's also, I believe, in Spanish, because I wrote it for a Spanish-speaking audience. But they're not complicated words in Spanish. By the way, this was also the attendance tool, so whoever didn't fill this out, they'll be getting a little notice. So, the purpose of information is to be able to answer your questions. Everything else you all described is exactly what you should do after you have your question answered to apply it. Comparing performances, assessing how your business is operating, what you're going to do, what tweak you're going to make, what experimental change you're going to have.
Could that be enlarged?
Yeah, I believe so. Let me do that. How about that? Everyone able to see now?
That's better.
Okay. So, none of you may have come here with the question of, what is the most popular music streaming app in my Strawberry Industry class? But now you know. It is Spotify. Overwhelmingly, 75% of this class uses Spotify to stream and listen to music. This is not an advertisement, by the way. I don't want anyone to change their subscriptions because of this. The point being that some of this here might have been totally assumed. Probably most of you would have assumed Spotify is the most used music streaming app. Many people would probably assume Netflix is the most used video movie streaming application. Some might be surprised that Amazon Prime is better than Disney Plus when it comes to this class, not in terms of quality, but just use. Someone might be surprised that Apple Maps is the most used map service. This gives me a little bit more information. This means that at least 67% of you have iPhones in this class, because if you didn't, you wouldn't be using Apple Maps unless you have your iPad on your car. 29% Google, and one person probably with Waze. Yep. You don't have to raise your hand, it's okay. Shopping. Market dominance. 94% of you use Amazon, and I'm going to guess possibly the person who uses Waze and someone else use Walmart Plus. Point being that social media, Instagram, the most widely used, TikTok, and then LinkedIn. And then after that is Facebook, which they have said Facebook is kind of dying amongst our generation. The point of all of this, and then Google and ChatGPT, which did not exist 2 years ago. Well, 3 years ago now almost. Did not exist. And now it's become 15% of your all's primary search application. A component of why data is important is if I was a marketing strategist, or if I ran a business, or if I was looking to go to a job, I now have an amazing survey of a college class. Says use of different applications. And on top of that, some of these might have provided a degree of something we call surprise. You might not have expected Apple Maps to be the most used service over Google Maps. That surprise is actually a component of data science. Data is more valuable when it surprises you. If I tell you a meteor, maybe that's a little bit extreme, but but if I tell you that eating carrots or drinking 2 beers before you go to sleep will give you a better night's sleep versus me telling you going to bed will give you a better night's sleep, which one is more interesting to you? Probably the first one, because we all know that if you go to bed, you will have a better night's sleep. So how can data specifically help a strawberry operation? You all are here working in strawberries, and I'm going to grab mind if I borrow your pen real quick? I'm going to write some of these answers down because they might help me, so don't patent anything. How can data help a strawberry operation?
I mean, like we talked about before, your yield outlook, so how much you expect to have at the end of the year.
Yield outlook, perfect.
Harvest efficiencies.
Harvest efficiencies, love it.
Pest management.
Pest management, fantastic.
Something like water or power use.
Water use. Yeah, and power use, especially now that we report sustainability data too. Anyone else? I'll take 2 more.
Disease incidents.
Disease incidents, fantastic, and that ties perfectly with pest management.
Labor costs.
Labor costs. I'm going to add 2 more. Genetic makeup and market demand. So I've got yield outlook, harvest efficiencies, pest management, water and power use, disease incidents, labor costs, genetic makeup, and market demand. For those of you here who are taking a varied number of majors, would you say that there is a singular major here that covers all of those topics? The reason being that agriculture, not just strawberries, but all of agriculture, is so interdisciplinary that it pulls all these different pieces together. You can optimize the genetic makeup of your crop. You can optimize for which genetics work perfectly with where we are. But if no one shows up to harvest it, then so what? You could have the perfect genetic makeup, the perfect layout of your operation. Everyone comes, they harvest perfectly. But if you're harvesting at the point where market demand doesn't exist and you're losing money harvesting, then what's the point? You could do everything I just said, and then a massive rainstorm comes through and wipes out your entire operation. Or a rainstorm comes and hits a different part of the world that you compete with, and now your crop is more valuable. Point being, in the world of data, we're able to help a strawberry operation because we don't have any expertise in any of these. If you ask me about a specific pest, I probably won't have the answer or even know what it is exactly. Or a specific irrigation plan or a particular fertilizer. What we do is we pull all that information together, combine it in ways that allow us to observe or identify a story or an answer, like we did with those pie charts, which is a really good example of something that's incredibly important in data science, which is visualization of information. And then we give it back to the professionals to allow them to make the decisions. We don't yet live in the world of an AI is running the operation. But we do have a huge team of incredibly intelligent and capable people that sometimes just don't have the information they need to make the decisions they want to make. So talking about some of those things you all brought up, for example, harvest efficiencies, we have yield per acre data. Yield per acre being the way in which we assess the efficiency of a particular variety at our operations. You have over time graphs. I removed names because I don't want to talk about any specific varieties on here. But you'll have information from different regions. Can you guys see the difference in behavior in Watsonville versus Santa Maria. Here you have what is the summer plant coming online. Do you see the different behavior of different varieties? You have here the variety in red, which has a lower yield, but a more consistent production curve. And then you have these two varieties, the green and the blue, both with the exact same yield per acre, but entirely different production curves. While the peaks might be the same, one peaks significantly higher, while the other has a far longer production window. Why does this matter? It matters because it's not just biology, but it's biology and economics that merge in a strawberry operation. And while this might look great, if a strawberry box costs $8 a tray here and $16 to $20 a tray here, which one are you going to choose? That might depend on a lot of factors, but the point being, production curves are sometimes a little more informative than just seeing two overall numbers of 22,000 trays per hectare. You would think that these varieties are exactly the same. You get the same thing here. Another thing to point out is this is kind of that gap that exists between the fall/winter planted crop going offline and the summer planted crop coming online in the Santa Maria area, which is where we are basically. Then you get more temporal information. Rather than separating districts, now we have everything put together, but we're looking at 2021 versus 2022 versus 2023. This is all of California production put together. This is Watsonville, Santa Maria, and Oxnard. You can see changes in the behavior of the yield curves in the different years and pull in weather information and pull in labor stats to understand why does 2021 have a nearly perfect plateau, but 2022 drops off considerably when we get to the July, early August period. You can observe the big California struggle, which is that California does not really have strong production in these months. The same exists for organic. And it's fascinating because you can see some of the same trends that exist here appearing there as well. And then you also have just lower overall production in 2023. And then we get into other attributes like quality, which is sometimes an easily overlooked attribute of strawberries. When you all go to the grocery store, any of you, or I was just at the botrytis studies you have going, everything in that big tub you're not going to buy at the grocery store. Everything that's moldy, anything that doesn't taste sweet, all of the deformed fruit. You all have probably seen deformities that you didn't think existed in strawberries. All of those attributes need to be analyzed and looked at so we understand what we're providing to our customers, so that way our labor and resources aren't going to waste into a rejection. And so you have stats on bricks, which is not a constant attribute. It changes over time. It is true that some berries do get less sweet over the course of the season. And they do it differently, but overall they follow the same trend. It's also true that size changes over the course of the season. You might sometimes get a very early smaller fruit, and then a couple weeks later, massive apple-sized strawberries, and then it starts to shrink again. All of these factors are incredibly important for us to study and understand. Decay. Yeah?
On the previous slide.
Yeah.
Do you have data where you can report customer satisfaction with the bricks and the berries? With those two graphs?
We are working on that specifically right now. The reason why is because bricks is not maybe the best definer of taste. It's used as a proxy for it, but as you all know, it's maybe not the most accurate. You could have a high bricks berry that doesn't taste particularly good. So we're working on that feature currently. It's a fantastic question. Any other questions? Decay. Decay is another fascinating attribute. It's the #1 cause of rejections. It's super obvious. And if you go to the grocery store and you're looking at a clamshell and you see a berry with mold and decay, you won't even think to buy it. If you only have 3 clamshells to choose from, they all have a decayed berry, you won't buy a strawberry that day. If some of them are bruised, you might be like, you know what, I could freeze these and make something. But a decayed berry is useless. And so we analyzed that defect amongst 15 others, but that one very heavily. And here, again, every line is separated by different varieties. So you can observe these are all planted in the same area. They're all in San Quintin, Baja California. They behave entirely differently. This one, which is post a rain event, had a huge spike in decay, highly sensitive variety. But you look at the green, and this is less an attribute of a strong event and more a potential problem in either its management or its genetics. And so we look at these different behaviors because a discrete point is not always enough to identify a trend.
Any idea what is causing? It looks like that variety that had more decay later in the season was also less susceptible to the rain.
To the rain event, exactly.
Any idea what might be going on there, or just an observation?
So when it comes to how we apply it, we usually will take this in terms of what we're going to plant next year. In our industry, we're not always the best at, and this is where the universities come in and help a lot, we're not always the best at finding the causal agents. A lot of times, we need to make business decisions quickly, and so we take an information point like this, we're like, okay, this one is incredibly susceptible towards the end of the season. What we'll do is we'll either call it off and have smaller acreage of it, or if we observe that there's no rain events, we won't plant it at all because we won't have to worry about these having intense decay issues in that spike. So, and that mix of varieties allows us to diversify our portfolio. So that way when this one is having a huge decay event, we don't have any issues here. And then when these aren't having decay events, we can start pulling this one offline. This is really nice because you can control it. It's a period in time in the season that we've observed where it's just better to stop producing it. This is uncontrollable. You can't control the weather. And so it's more about mitigation rather than control. Yeah.
And is this data, decay, is this data that your buyers are giving you, or is this data that you're collecting in the field?
This is data we collect. So all the data that we have that I'm showing is entirely collected internally. So we inspect our own fruit. A large part of the reason for that is it is incredibly costly from a customer relationship standpoint and a resource standpoint to send bad fruit to a customer and pray that they accept it. So we have to do a lot of our own internal policing and assess our fruit before it gets shipped out.
So sorry to admit.
Yeah, no.
Going on this point, is this then harvested fruit that you're detecting the decay in a clamshell?
Exactly,
Okay.
which is the problem. So decay in a field is a different problem than decay in the clamshell. Because between the clamshell and the field, there's a human judgment being made of the quality of that fruit. And there's also a cold chain being broken and then reestablished. And so here, most of our assessments are on what the customer will receive and see. We don't go through the field and assess unharvested fruit for its defects at the moment. Right now, we look at what's arriving into the clamshells, which is why a spike like this is incredibly concerning. You'll see the percents are really small, right? I mean, this is 3%, which is high for us. But in the field, this might be actually 40%, but only 3% is going into the clamshell. And that's a problem. Yes, I think.
Yes, I was gonna get on that bandwagon based on sort of what you said. I mean, it looks like a big spike there, but it's 3% versus 1.5%. The 3% of what, 3 clamshells or 3,000 clamshells?
This is, so we do our inspections on per year about 150 to 200,000 clamshells. So it's high volume. We'll do about, depending on the time of the year, somewhere around 700 inspections, sometimes in a day.
So statistically significant, we say.
Yeah. We have to be. It's not because we're researchers. I would love to say that for the greater good of the scientific community, we're taking so many samples, but it is entirely for our profitability as an industry that we lose far more money sending pallets to Ralph's, Kroger, Walmart, Costco, Whole Foods, and then rejecting it than we do trying to improve our quality that goes out the door. And you'll find that a lot of our focus and work goes into quality.
Another question about
Yeah.
this, sorry.
Yeah.
Are those spikes also tied to rejected loads? If you're gonna have rejections, is that gonna be the time when you see them?
That, yes, in theory, that is a hard thing we've found to link. The supply chain is a very complicated, not well tied together entity, I guess I would call it. And so we know in general where our berries come from, and we can loosely tie them together. But there's a lot of decisions that go into rejections that aren't always objective. And so we have found that we will have periods like this and a ton of rejections. And we'll have periods like this and no rejections. Why? Because economics plays into it. If there's not much fruit in the market and retailers need fruit, they will have a higher tolerance. If there's a ton of fruit in the market, a 0.05% decay rate could result in a rejection. And so it's hard to correlate that because we're sending a semi-objective but still also semi-subjective system to compare to another subjective system, and they don't speak well to each other. But that, we would love to.
That makes sense.
So the retailers, we're stuck on this slide.
Yeah, I know. I
So the
love it.
retailers tell you ahead of time, like, we're only gonna take 0.5%? Or is it just sort of, it gets, they're like, you know what, this is a 0.25%, we don't want it this time?
Our assessment of what percent retailers will take is based off of us kind of taking our own rejection report back data from them. They don't tell us what percent. They don't really give us a really detailed score on why it was rejected. We get a very binary. They'll tell us why, the general defect, but it's not a percentage. And so we'll get a binary relatively rejected, accepted, or something in between. And then we go through and compare it to this. And that's where we've observed that we will have periods of high percent decay, but no rejections, and other periods of no decay and rejections, or periods of high decay and high rejections.
What rejection means, like, is the pallet, like, you bring 10 pallets the Safeway and they reject one of them, or are they gonna, they tend to like do all of them?
It depends on they do it on a case by case. Exactly. This is the beauty of agriculture, is there is no like singular answer to anything. Or at least the beauty of selling commodities. Really quick before I skip that, move off the slide. Any other questions from the audience on quality? Another attribute, labor. So we as an operation, we're observing some trends, which is harvest hours is an incredibly important. A lot of people talk about wage. A lot of people like to talk about how much money someone makes per hour. Very few times do they talk about how many hours that person is working. A lot of things that will happen in a lot of industries is when you raise the minimum wage, which is not a bad thing per se, you reduce the amount of hours people work. And at the end of the day, what you take home is not your wage. What you take home are your earnings, which is a component of your wage and your hours. So we were observing that, for example, in some operations, we were working below 7 harvest hours. At other operations, we were working nearly at 7 harvest hours over the course of the season. And something important to observe is this black line, the average number of harvest hours worked at that operation. The red line is the number of harvesters per hectare at that operation. You'll see that it is nearly double for the operation that works less harvest hours than the one that works more. It's a completely logical, easy to come to conclusion, but as I'll talk about later in the presentation, that difference is incredibly important when you're managing an operation that involves people that are earning a living. And then as we talked about quality, because it is an incredibly important attribute of what we do, there is a concept called pick to cool. Pick to cool refers to the time at which the strawberry was picked to to the moment it enters the cold chain at 34 degrees, cooled. That time period needs to be as short as humanly possible, because from a study, I believe, performed by Davis or here, it was observed that every hour that a strawberry spends out of the cold chain shaves off a significant amount of time from its shelf life. So what we have to do is also track the amount of time that our trucks spend from the moment a pallet is completed to when it arrives to our coolers in the cold chain. And we observe with these bar graphs periods where we have high incidences of above 2 hours, that's what the red indicates, and then other periods where we're doing phenomenally. All of these different attributes are how data can help manage a business, how you can use information to improve your product to your customer and also reduce the costs that you are incurring as a business and hopefully improve the quality of life and the experience of the people working there as well. So I'm really quickly going to show a video and then go back to the presentation. Before I
Can
do
you
that,
explain this a little?
any other
The
questions?
yellow, the red, or
Yeah.
remind us what they all mean?
So green, below 1 hour. Yellow, between 1 and 2 hours. Red, 2 hours and above. This is essentially taken for every pallet that goes through our system. The time, what it spent from the instant it was done being harvested to the moment it arrives at our cooler, is assessed, and for the percentage of all loads, we create these graphics. The purpose of which, again, as I will talk about later in visualization, it's incredibly important that you can be the smartest guy in the world, but if no one understands what you're talking about, it doesn't matter. And so a really easy visualization tool is the stoplight tool. Green is good, yellow is okay, red is bad. Optimize for green, minimize red, and you're able to communicate regardless of language to any audience, honestly, regardless of education level, what the goals are with your information.
And those periods where you have circled them, those are periods where your red bars are high.
Exactly.
And how many hours is that? I can't, my eyes are.
So these are all over 2 hours,
Over 2.
but this is a percentage. So
Okay.
this would say that roughly 77% of our loads were above 2 hours. This would be early January, it's like January 14th, roughly.
So no particular reason why that's happening in January? Or is there a good reason why it's taking longer in January?
There's a good reason for this one. So this is San Quintin again. San Quintin has a production cycle very similar to Oxnard. So it'll come on around late November, December, and then the production really picks up when you're going into late January, mid-late January, and then onward through to February, March. So your transition points are always the hardest for any business, and strawberry farming has a lot of transition points. So you're transitioning from a lower production season here, and strawberries tend not to let you know when they're going to come online, to a huge amount of production, and the limiting factor is always trucks and truck drivers. So we're talking about labor now. Labor comes into play. We just didn't have enough trucks rented. And so then we rented them, and things got better. Not all the solutions are necessarily complex. But without the information, it's hard to know where the problem is and when it happens.
And can you look at a chart like this and year after year sort of predict when those problems are and then have the trucks ready, or is that the idea?
That's the idea. At the end of the day, yield prediction is it's the, not quite the holy grail, but it's one of those mystery things that a lot of people in the industry want to achieve, because when you are able to predict your yield, you can solve so many problems with proactive planning. You know how many harvesters you need. It's no longer a guessing game of whether to bring in a crew or not. You know how many trucks you need. You know every component you need in this industry, because we're an industry that scales up and scales down. So it is very expensive for us to have everything all year for our peak production. So many times we need to bring on the equipment we need, and to be able to do that we need heads up, and unfortunately right now we have the best we can, but it's still not perfect. Yeah, really good question. Okay, anything else before the video? Okay, so the video is in English and Spanish because, again, like I said, in this industry, the majority of the people that are working in it speak Spanish. So what we did is this was a video we made for our own company internally. So when someone is speaking English, there are subtitles in Spanish. When someone is speaking Spanish, there are subtitles in English. So that way, regardless of your language, you can understand the entire video.
How many people in this class speak Spanish? Quite a few. So.
Perfect.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Buenos días, mi nombre es José María Luna y más bien conocido por Don Chema.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Laura Álvarez.
Joaquín Soto Briones.
Adriana Judith Marrón Aranco.
Rubén Cruz.
Marilu Ramírez.
Mi posición es nómina.
Mayordomo. Soy supervisor de cosecha.
Supervisor encargado de grupos, cosecha. Soy un enlace de comunicación.
Encargado de producción y seguridad aquí en Sierra Farms.
I am a district manager here in Oxnard, California.
Gerente de producción del Milagro de Baja en San Quintín, Baja California.
Me encargo del área de calidad.
Trabajo para el Milagro de Baja en el área de H2A. Antes de tener estas herramientas, regularmente todo era de una forma manual y tardía.
No conocíamos qué eran los datos. Tanto nosotros como los mayordomos, como pescadores.
Antes, pues, no había mucha información. Sí, había lo básico de años atrás, había historiales de producción, historiales de años atrás, pero siempre era, vamos a ver qué pasó el año pasado. So, realmente no puedes decir qué está pasando ahorita en vivo.
Very frustrating at times trying to get the correct information that we were, as an operator, looking for.
Anteriormente manejábamos todo en papel. Eran bitácoras de calidad que íbamos creando día a día en los cuartos fríos, en las visitas a los campos. Y ese papel, lo único que hacíamos era almacenar y no teníamos un procesamiento de esos datos.
We struggled a lot with the bias opinions within the fields of our employees, complaints with our forepersons and supervisors. When it came to the policies that were implemented and trying to reinforce that, a lot of the information would be construed.
Manejamos anteriormente de diferentes partes para saber cuadrilla, trabajador, rendimiento. Entonces se nos dificultaba un poco más el tiempo, ¿verdad? Era más tiempo lo que le invertíamos.
It's been a huge collaboration with everybody. The data team, the operators, as well as the supervisors and the foremen have all had a hand in helping build the platform so that it benefited everybody. It's not just a one size fits all. It's able to morph into these different ways so everybody has information that is useful to them.
The data team reached out to the operations, myself, Christian, and my team, and they investigated the needs of the operation, what information we needed as operators to make decisions at the field level. So basically is the time that you guys took and ourselves obviously suggesting how do we want reports and what kind of data on those reports. I think that was helpful.
En nosotros nos basamos mucho en parte a lo que los clientes nos marcaban o lo crítico que ellos se basaban para hacernos un rechazo o hacernos las observaciones más fuertes.
Ahora que tengo las herramientas, puedo tener monitoreado el rendimiento, ¿sí? Calidad, producción y mi mano de obra. Y eso me ayuda a tomar mejores decisiones día a día, mejorando mis procesos.
Put ourselves, the company and the employees in the position to succeed.
Y ya ahora, pues ya puedes ver, dices, bueno, podemos ver, ¿no? De cuánto tarda las paletas del campo al cuarto frío. Puedes ver la producción no nada más de los empleados y de las cuadrillas, pero ahora está por cada cuadrilla en una hoja. Ahora están todas las cuadrillas en el famoso dashboard, ¿no?
Bueno, pues claro que tener datos y números reales en base a lo que se cosecha, como tiempos, tener acceso y poder mirar estos números nos ayuda bastante para mirar en dónde estamos parados y qué tenemos que trabajar o mejorar.
Tenemos más eficiencia en cosecha, de que aumentamos más la calidad, porque no queremos ser menos, queremos ser más. Con los datos sabemos que cuánto estamos ganando diariamente.
Ahora en el bono de los mayordomos ellos también se motivan porque si van a incrementar más en menos tiempo, sacar la producción, ellos también llevan un bono extra parte de los cheques. Para eso a mí se me hace que les ha ayudado bastante.
Ahora ellos sí se puede ver un dashboard, en dado caso que haya un error, se puede identificar más rápido y se corrige el dashboard y ya ahora los datos ya están más leíbles para nosotros, bueno, para todos.
No batallamos. La verdad, estamos encantados de usar esa aplicación. Prácticamente nos arroja todo lo que ocupamos en H2A.
Es más fácil para nosotros, nos ayuda más en motivar al personal. De mi parte, de mi punto de vista, a mí me ayuda más en estar más al corriente.
A big part of my job was lotting, so making sure we had the strongest fruit going to the furthest destinations was a big part of that, and helping minimize some of the rejections. Now with this dashboard, that job has gotten a lot easier because everything I need is on the dashboard. Now we're making sure the best fruit is going to the right places, and it's been a tremendous help.
Que el consumidor tenga confianza en que este producto va de buena calidad.
By having the data on time has cut waste, has improved our efficiency, has improved our supervisors or foremen or crews. Obviously, we can now tell the story of each crew, of each picker. So that type of information has given us more value in return.
I think we're at a good place. I think with the teams that we have and the information that we have, we're kind of at a stationary place where we can really see the benefit of the program and really see how it's going to work within our team so that we know how to make it grow for the future. I see it as more of a living, breathing platform where it's going to be live, it's going to be real-time data, it's going to be a situation where potentially we have possibly screens on the trailers so all of the employees know where they're at, what they're doing within their groups. I see us being able to pull up anything we want at any moment and having a true live view of it. But at that point, we'll really be able to make some, at that moment, decisions based upon that particular data.
I think just keeping to use that information or continuing to use that information to support decisions we're making internally, whether that be a variety discussion or a size count discussion or in using that information to share that with customers, just continuing to just reinforce each other in that aspect. I think ultimately that'd be productive to do better arrivals to all of our customers.
Okay, so the question I want to ask you all is how can this data be collected? What are some ideas you all might have of where we could get this information from? Now that you've seen the video, different people at different levels of our operation at different points talking about how information has been useful to them, how having direct access to that information as opposed to a report sent to them totally pre-interpreted has helped them take decisions based off what they know. Where are we getting this information from? How do we get there? Yeah.
I imagine a lot of it has to be done just by hand, where in the case of time from picking to when it's in the cooler, having someone keep track of, hey, when did we start picking, and then another person say, when did that truck clock in at the refrigeration location.
Okay, that's a really good idea. What are some of the other ideas? Take 2 more so you guys know that after 2 it'll be over.
QR code stickers to put on each tray to scan as you're going.
Okay, QR code scanning stickers, I like it. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it measurement devices, so scales, all that sort of stuff.
Perfect.
Ultimately, people.
Yeah.
And people.
Right? People have to tell you. You have to communicate to them what it is that you want, and then they have to then get you that piece of information.
Yeah.
And then how to do that is a second question, but the mechanism by which you're going to get that data. But people have to know that that you want it, and then how to get it, right? All those people on your video, I think, were part of that data collection, probably.
100%. 100%. People, as your process involves people, the QR codes, a human has to scan that QR code. There's people involved in every step. Another thing as well is that most strawberry operations, any business already has the tools they need to collect this information. Why? Because of the law. As much as some businesses might stress about some of the laws that they have to follow or accounting rules or food safety rules, we all know that they're incredibly important, as much as they might add a lot of work to what we do. But the beautiful thing about it is that they have put processes on us, or we have developed processes that require documentation. And documentation is data. Your payroll system is data. Typically, an operation will pay piece rate. So you're paying harvesters for the boxes they harvested. You now know how many boxes you harvested. You know how much time it took. A lot of operations have weather stations, as you pointed out, instrumentation, weather stations. As our QA manager pointed out, there is a lot of paper collection for everything, from our sprays, irrigation, fertilizer applications, every single thing, thank you to government, has to be tracked. But that is a tool, because now that you have it organized, all you have to do is take it from this to this, digitize it, make that analysis process a lot easier. We have an incredible wealth of government services that provide large amounts of data. NASA has satellites all over the Earth that are constantly assessing solar radiation, precipitation, wind speeds, all sorts of important climatic variables that we would need in our operations. The USDA collects an incredible amount of information on supply and demand, on pricing, on how product quality is crossing the border into this country. And for operations that work in Mexico, the Servicio Meteorológico Nacional offers a ton of incredible weather data. So now you have information, and there's NOAA, and there's CEMAS. There is a huge wealth of free information that exists to be able to piece all of this together. And that's what matters most, is your data exploration process. Data should not be expensive, because we are not data companies, we are strawberry companies. And so the investment is in the strawberry, not so much in the data. Let me see. Oh, I think I need to click. Nice. So this is our super simple process, nothing fancy. We essentially connect with process stakeholders to identify the issues. That's what you saw in that video where they were talking about how are these dashboards built, that the data team, as it was described there, went out and not only talked, you have to be there. One conversation is not enough to know what someone's process is. It takes time, it takes a relationship with that person, and it takes a two-way exchange. It takes understanding that what you present to them, they will change, and you need to accept those changes because no one knows their process better than them. But it also requires the ability to persuade, because while they might know their process well, they don't know the technology you are providing oftentimes. And you might have a tool that can make things so much easier, and you need to find a way to explain that. And then using the available data like I described, there's so much information already there that you might not need to invest in collecting more. Using that data to analyze and assess what are the problem areas. What limits and thresholds can we apply to a process to be able to take it from this box and whisker plot, which not necessarily the average person will be able to look at and come up with a solution to, and convert it into something that anyone can look at and say, yes, that is how I improve my process. the most important, not really the most important, all this is incredibly important, but something that's easily overlooked is errors. This is a human process. Humans are involved in every step. And we, no matter how focused we are, make mistakes constantly. And so you need to have systems that can identify errors. If you get a brick score of 28, you need to have a system that can say, hey, we should probably look into that just to make sure. And so on and so forth. Because if not, you might come to the end of the year and none of your information is useful. And it is a cycle. You go back, you train the process stakeholders. Do not assume that what you implement, you're done. They will have comments, I promise you, because I wouldn't have a job if they didn't. And then you will complete this circle all over again. For any of you who've worked on a strawberry operation, there is a huge web of communication networks. You have the business owners, you have the district managers, you have the sales office people, you have the PCAs. You have supervisors for different facets of the operation. Irrigation, land prep, harvest. You have foremen, you have harvesters, you have forklift drivers, you have QA inspectors. You have, in some cases, people that even clean the bathrooms to make sure that hygiene is maintained in the fields. You have food safety personnel. You have so many people. And I promise you, some speak Spanish, some probably speak Mixteco, some speak only English. And they all need to communicate and work together. If your information is like in the old school diagram I showed of the different communication styles where you're sitting around a campfire sharing your operational stories, we'll call it, you will wind up saying peas and getting fleas at the end. So the goal is to get everyone on this singular, unified information platform, so that way they're sharing their ideas and not the information. So an example of how we applied this, we observed in our, like I said, you have payroll and HR data, years of low retention. For anyone who is hoping for a biology-based example, I'm very sorry. I'm very partial to labor nowadays, so this is a labor example. 10 years, a decade of low retention. These are the turnover rates in agriculture. We're talking 46, at some point 16% of the workforce stayed through the season. Everyone else quit and were replaced with someone else. We observe this, as I talked earlier, earnings versus wage. Wages have gone up a lot, but time in the field had gone down. Could that have been a causal factor? We also talked to harvesters and foremen to assess, hey, is there anything here that we are working on average way less hours per person that could be causing this problem in turnover? We developed daily graphics based on their responses of, yes, there is quite probably and likely an issue there. With color coding, as I pointed out, because the goal is to make it universally accepted or universally understood of, hey, we're working way too much. Hey, this is just great. Hey, you know, that seems a bit low. And trends, resulting in, this is all from the same operation. If you look, that was 2021. You now have 2023, nearly following perfectly 7 harvest hours for the entire season. And here's the retention rate change. 2019, 2020, 2021 is very minimal change. 2022 and 2023, after providing harvesters with full harvest days, you go from the 30% we were looking at for almost a little over a decade to 71% retention. That's why we do this.
All right, thank you, Evan.
Yeah, no problem.
Really engaging seminar. What other questions do you all have before we go ahead, Colin?
What's the software you guys use that was shared in the video?
The dashboarding platform?
Yeah.
So that's QuickSight by AWS.
What's the advantage of that over Power BI?
We've used Tableau, Power BI, and QuickSight. At the end of the day, we run most of our operations on AWS, and it came down to pricing. The pricing model of QuickSight worked better for us, and its flexibility in being able to code some of the things on the back end was just, for our specificity of what we do and technical level, it just worked well for us. Yeah.
Have you seen any kind of negative effects from the data collection process, where the first thing I can think of is now, a crew that's going out and saying, hey, just pick as many strawberries as you can, now feeling like they have to hit a metric or hit a score. Have you run into any cases like that where?
We have definitely run into, there's that other part to it, which is communication is the most important component of everything, right? And we've observed different communication success at different operations. What I can say is over time, the environment has been incredibly positive towards these applications. One of the most common responses is, when I work here, I know that I'm being judged off of my work and not off of how someone feels about me, which is a very common problem in human-based, I don't want to keep using the word human like I'm a robot, but connection-based work, there is a likability feature that is really strong in agricultural crews. It's strong in any environment where you're working with the same people over and over again. But there was absolutely resistance in the beginning, because any change is a very hard change. And especially when someone maybe is not performing at the level that the company is expecting, but for a long time had been working there. That's the hardest thing, and I will be honest with you all, in any business, there is a balance between trying to make sure the business keeps functioning and trying to protect and maintain your workforce. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, for anyone who works in business long enough, you will face the time when those two conflict, and you will often have to choose the business, but you will have to find the best way to make sure that you are supporting as many people as possible when you make that decision. Yeah. Hopefully I answered the question.
Yeah. How are the people accessing the dashboard? Are they accessing it in real time on their phones? Do they have to wait till they get to a desktop or a laptop to do so, or all of the above?
All of the above, yeah. And we used to do probably a lot of operations work on this email-based reports. We really aggressively stopped those because emailed reports are a representation of the data at the time you sent it. Anything that changes, like error correction, maybe someone forgot to submit information, the information is now different. And so to move people onto a dashboarding platform, it goes again with that goal of everyone is looking at the exact same information at the exact same time. So, and a lot of that has been education. A lot of people honestly know phones better than computers. And so we have had to work to make sure it's available on mobile applications, but also ensure that our users understand how to access it and how to read it. So there's a huge amount of education in what we do. Yeah.
Does all of your collected data stay proprietary, or do you share with other growers in the industry or the commission, or collaborate with other growers on what they're seeing in trends and stuff?
Really good question. We are starting to try to collaborate more with groups like UC Davis, the commission as well. We're trying to set up connections and collaborate there. All other collaborations are a lot more verbal, anecdotal. We don't necessarily have an API connection between us and another grower, but the information and the knowledge is definitely shared. I would say for now, it's semi-proprietary, I guess would be the term. Yeah. Yeah.
This is a little bit back to your refrigeration example and saying, after 2 hours we're going to count that as a bad metric. Are most places looking for a metric like that? Say, 2 hours is a bad time. Are most businesses looking at their own metrics to make up that decision criteria and say 2 hours is going to be the point that we're going to call bad or good, or are you looking more towards published research that's out there?
So the 2 hours was based off published research. Other metrics that we utilize, we try not to compare businesses to each other because, especially in this, they're geographically separated, and there's a reason why. They all will have different either workplace cultures, different labor situations, different climates and soils. So we can't really draw like this operation gets 22,000 trays an acre or a hectare, and this one gets 10,000 trays a hectare. We can't really compare that because that might be great for that operation. So a lot of it is that presence and understanding of what the operation is. And that's kind of where it enters the world of being more qualitative than quantitative. It's a mix of both, of knowing the industry to kind of know where to put the context around the information, but then having the data to say, okay, this is the specific metric and the point at which we want to call that threshold. Yeah. And sometimes it's like a dartboard where you start with one and you're like, yeah, that was a bad idea, and you move down or you move up. Yeah.
So labor cost is one of the big costs of any business, even like paying people like yourself. Do you think these companies are integrating data collection on how productive people are, even in the office, and like the supervisors to make sure that everybody's bringing in the best return for the company?
Yeah, there's a blend to how you do that. No, there's not any like active effort to apply. Like if you've heard maybe in some of the tech companies where your mouse clicks are tracked or your eye movements on your computer. A lot of what I am trying to show and highlight here is the focus is a lot on the experience of the employee, because at the end of the day, you need to recruit people to work for you. And if you create an environment that is that hostile, there's an idea in economics that not just your wage is what you're receiving from a company. There's a non-dollar amount, or there's a dollar amount that can be assigned to your experience and the benefits you receive that aren't monetary. And so there is a balance to be had of, okay, we want as a team to be more productive and work forward and aim for the metrics that our business focuses on. But at the same time, we don't want to create a surveillance state, because if we do, no one's going to want to work there. So there's a balance. Any other questions?
Any other questions? All right. That'll do it then. Thank you, Evan, for